Walk into almost any shopping mall in America and look at the store directory. Gap, Petco, Guitar Center, Dollar General. Different names, different colors, different promises. It looks like a competitive marketplace. Dozens of companies fighting for your attention and your money. But the structure behind those brands is far simpler than it appears. Because behind many of those names, behind the logo, the branding, the advertising, there's a single financial mechanism. A mechanism that was not designed to build those companies. It was designed to extract from them. This is the story of the leveraged buyout, and it is the most consequential financial structure you have never been taught. What private equity actually is. To understand how this happened, go back to 1976. That year, Jerome Kohlberg, Henry Kravis, and George Roberts left Bear Stearns and founded a small investment partnership called KKR. Their business model was elegant in its simplicity and devastating in its consequences. They would identify a profitable company, a company with predictable cash flows. Then they would buy it, not with their own money, but with borrowed money, sometimes as much as 90% borrowed. And here is where the system becomes interesting. The debt they used to buy the company was not placed on the private equity firm's balance sheet. It was placed on the company they just purchased. The acquired company was now responsible for repaying the loan that had been used to buy itself. Every dollar of operating profit that might have gone to hiring employees, improving products, or cutting prices now went to servicing a debt it never agreed to take on. They called it a leveraged buyout. The leverage was not financial leverage for growth. It was leverage against the company's own future. The fee machine. The private equity firm does not need the company to survive in order to profit. The standard fee structure in private equity is called 2 and 20. 2% of all assets under management, charged annually, regardless of performance. 20% of all profits upon exit. A private equity firm managing $10 billion in assets collects $200 million per year in fees before a single investment performs, before a single job is saved, before a single brand improves, before a single store opens or closes or declares bankruptcy. The fee machine runs whether the companies thrive or collapse. This is not a secondary detail. This is the architecture. The firm profits from managing the asset. The firm also profits when it sells the asset. The firm does not profit from whether the asset's employees still have jobs or whether the communities that depended on it survive the transaction. Those outcomes are external to the incentive structure. And incentive structures determine behavior with a precision that stated intentions never can. That is not a design flaw. That is the design. The debt trap in practice. In 2005, KKR, Bain Capital, and Vornado Realty acquired Toys R Us for $6.6 billion. $5.3 billion of that purchase price was borrowed, and that $5.3 billion in debt was immediately placed on Toys R Us itself. The company that had once competed on price, on selection, on the experience of being the destination for every child's birthday, was now paying over $400 million per year just in interest. Not to improve stores, not to build an e-commerce platform to compete with Amazon, just to stay current on the loan used to buy them. Think about what that meant in practice. While Amazon was investing billions in logistics infrastructure, while Walmart was modernizing its supply chain, Toys R Us was mathematically prevented from doing either. Every dollar that should have gone toward competing went instead toward servicing a debt that had been placed on the company by people who didn't build it. In 2017, Toys R Us filed for bankruptcy. 33,000 employees lost their jobs. KKR, Bain, and Vornado had already extracted hundreds of millions in fees and dividends over the 12 years they owned the company. They did not lose money on Toys R Us. Toys R Us lost everything. The pattern. Toys R Us is not an exception. It is the example the system reliably produces. Sears, purchased by private equity-backed investors in 2005. Bankruptcy in 2018. 175,000 jobs eliminated. Payless Shoe Source, leveraged buyout in 2012. Filed for bankruptcy twice, in 2017 and again in 2019. 4,000 store closures. David's Bridal, leveraged buyout in 2012. Bankruptcy in 2018. Bankruptcy again in 2023. Guitar Center, leveraged buyout in 2007. Bankruptcy in 2020. The pattern is not coincidence. The pattern is the product. Each of these companies entered private equity ownership with cash flows sufficient to operate. Each was loaded with debt on acquisition. Each paid that debt through the profits that might otherwise have funded competition and adaptation. Each failed when the debt overwhelmed the operating capacity that remained. The specific companies change. The structure that produces their failure does not. The scale of the system. In 1980, private equity managed roughly $5 billion in global assets. Today, that number is $12 trillion. That shift matters not just in scale, but in reach. Private equity no longer operates primarily in retail. It now owns veterinary clinics, emergency rooms, nursing homes, apartment complexes, newspapers, and prisons. The leveraged buyout structure, debt loaded onto the acquired organization, fees extracted regardless of outcome, has been applied to institutions that do not have the option of disappearing the way a toy store can. A nursing home loaded with acquisition debt still has to accept elderly patients. An emergency room loaded with acquisition debt still has to treat heart attacks. A residential apartment complex loaded with acquisition debt still has to house tenants. But in every case, the cost of that debt is ultimately borne not by the private equity firm, it is borne by the people who depend on those institutions, in higher prices, in reduced staffing, in lower quality of care, in rent that climbs faster than wages because the building's owner is servicing an acquisition loan rather than maintaining the property. The structure that extracted value from Toys R Us is the same structure operating in the places where people receive medical care, where elderly people live, where families rent their homes. The brands change. The mechanism is identical. What the system actually optimizes for. Private equity does not optimize for brands. It does not optimize for employees or communities or product quality. It optimizes for a single variable, the internal rate of return over a 3 to 7 year hold period. Everything else, every layoff, every price increase, every quality reduction, every deferred maintenance decision is a downstream consequence of that one optimization target. The brands in the mall directory are not the goal. They are the asset. Assets to be acquired, loaded, managed, and eventually sold to another fund, to the public through an IPO, or to a strategic buyer before the full cost of the debt structure becomes visible. The exit is the product. Everything between acquisition and exit is expense management. The leveraged buyout is not a failure of capitalism. It is capitalism operating exactly as the incentive structure demands. When the financial reward for extracting a company exceeds the financial reward for building it, extraction is the rational choice. Every time. Not because the people making that choice are uniquely corrupt, because the system rewards extraction and penalizes the patience that building requires. The stores in that mall directory are not abstract. They were the places where people worked, where people shopped, where communities organized their daily lives. The nursing homes are not abstract. The emergency rooms are not abstract. The apartment complexes are not abstract. The debt placed on those companies was not placed on a balance sheet. It was placed on a generation, in the form of job losses, price increases, reduced services, and institutions that were structurally prevented from investing in the people who depended on them. That structure was built in 1976 in a small partnership on Park Avenue. It now controls more of the American economy than most governments. The structure is never what it appears to be. If you want to understand how power is built and how it extracts, subscribe to Architects of Power, because we are only getting started.